Hey, what's going on, guys? This is AndrewChicken, and welcome back to another Deadlock video. I'm in somewhat of a unique position when it comes to Deadlock because I have just over 100 hours in the game, which is a lot of time for some games, but for Deadlock, it's merely a drop in the bucket because this game has some of the most depth out of any competitive game that there is out there. And so, while I do know a lot more than the average noob, I'm still nowhere even close to being considered a top-tier player. So, I'm going to attempt to make a tier list today, and I want all the good players in the comments section down below, all the high-ranked people to, well, comment what I got wrong versus what I got right in this tier list. This will be my perspective coming at it from my experiences in Deadlock thus far, slightly over 100 hours into the game. So, let's get started. We're going to rank every character on the tier list here. We have a pretty standard tier ranking here. We have S for best of the best, A for excellent choices, B for decent picks, and C for subpar characters. And then, we have the D tier, but I'm actually just going to remove it, because I don't think any character in this game is that bad that they're just throwing. That's what the D tier is for, and my tier list usually is throwing tier, and nobody's that bad in this game, come on. So, let's get started with Abrams. Abrams is quite an interesting character because he is, I think, the character who makes the most use out of the melee system that Deadlock has to offer. The light punches, the heavy attacks, and of course the parries. And he also generally has a lot of good close-range damage. He's a very tanky character. That said, if you know how to parry, then Abrams suddenly becomes a lot more difficult to get value out of because he does like going in for those big wallops of damage, beating people to death. Certainly, that's not the only way to play him, and of course, you also want to make good use out of his shotgun, out of his close-range leech, out of the stuns, all that sort of stuff. But because he is so dependent on the melee system, I don't really see Abrams players do that good once people start parrying him consistently. So I'm going to put him into B tier. He's certainly a good character, very tanky character, but not someone who I would consider super strong. Can't wait to read the comments and see if people are already disagreeing with me from pick 1. Wouldn't that be funny? Anyways, next we have Bebop. Bebop is a pretty strong character in my experience, and right now I'm debating whether to put him in S or A tier, because Bebop has a lot of great things at his disposal. Of course, he has the scaling bomb damage, but as I've learned from chat in my streams, Bebop is not super dependent on his bombs the higher up you go, because it's very easy to get rid of them with debuff remover, and so he ends up depending more on his gun and his hooks and his ultimate in order to actually get value. And a hook, a well-placed hook, can just instantly evaporate an enemy. You can draw them so far out of position that your team just destroys them. And it's not an ultimate ability either. As a matter of fact, the hook can have a pretty low cooldown if you do it right. So, Bebop is very scary because of that. I think I'm going to put him in S. Yeah, that seems about right. Sure. Next up, we have Calico, one of the characters I understand the least in this game. She apparently is ridiculously strong. I have no idea why. I see her get all kinds of kills in my lobbies, I hear people complaining about her, but I just don't really get what in her kit makes her that strong. So I'm going to need some people to educate me how Calico works in the comments section down below. But for now, I'm going to put her in S because I know she's pretty strong, even if I have no idea what I'm doing when I play her. Dynamo! The friend-shaped guy who has a bunch of impregnator builds? Huh? Why is the Deadlock community so weird? Anyways, Dynamo's going to go in S as well, because Dynamo has a lot of powerful tools in his kit. He has a pretty good gun, he has a really powerful first ability for doing consistent big bursts of spirit damage, and he also has some tools to help support his team. He has the ability to make him and a bunch of other people around him immortal for a brief time, allowing him to dodge a plethora of ults and other powerful abilities. He has the crazy healing aura, which gives him and his teammates, you know, some pretty good self-sustain early game, and later in the game, it can be used to run down people and reposition really fast. And obviously, his ultimate, his ultimate is freaking crazy. There's a very good reason why it has the longest cooldown in the game, because it sucks everybody in and stuns them for an extended period of time, locking down multiple enemies, shutting down ults, and letting Dynamo's team get a bunch of kills if they coordinate it properly. Dynamo's ult is crazy. Overall, pretty darn good character. Alright, let's talk about Gramps, Grey Talon. He is a pretty interesting character. He is the bow guy, and he has pretty powerful, consistent bursts burst with his arrows, and he also has the ability to get some pretty good movement because of his unique ability to scale his movement speed based on his spirit, so that's pretty fun. And yeah, Grey Talon overall is a pretty solid character. I think I'm going to end up putting him in the B tier because while he does do a pretty good amount of damage, his movement ability is kind of weird. I feel like his movement ability, the one that makes him fly up into the sky, honestly makes him easier to hit than he is on the ground, because on the ground he can do dodge rolls and stuff, and he can also take advantage of his movement speed. I don't know, it just strikes me as kind of odd. His Spirit Snare is also pretty good, but also pretty easy to avoid if you're looking out for it. And his ultimate is pretty nifty because it is really good for ganking in the early game. If you want to sit in your lane, send a bird over to a solo lane and kill a solo player, that can work really well. It's generally good as a finisher move, but it does also leave Grey Talon vulnerable, and it's kind of got its trade-offs. So I think he's a pretty solid character overall, but I'm going to put him into the B tier. Haze! I feel like Haze is a really hit-or-miss character. Whenever I see her in my lobbies, she's either the carry or she's being farmed, and I feel like there's almost no in-between. And I feel like that's because while she does have a pretty slow ramp-up early game, it does take her a long time to get access to her power, but then once she does get access to her key power points, she just spikes up into being someone who is ridiculously strong, doing tons of damage. So I'm going to put her into B, I think, because of that sort of fickle nature where she's either carrying or being carried. And, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's wrong. I guess if she's carrying, she's an S, but then if she's, you know, not carrying, if she has a terrible build-up, then she's going to be in C. So yeah, I guess, yeah, we'll average it out. We'll put her in B. Holliday is another character who I'm not super good at. I have seen her achieve some pretty good successes, though. She's kind of an interesting character because she has her gunplay styles where you shoot people, rely on the headshots with her third ability, and then, of course, you also have the spirit damage with the explosive jump pad and the barrels knocking them down and hitting enemies. So she has a few good ways to be played, and I think overall she's a pretty solid character. So we're going to put her into A tier. I feel like she is capable of a lot. But from my personal experience, not an S tier character. Now, if this tier list were based on how cool the characters look, Infernus would be the easiest S tier of my life. He looks so freaking cool. I love it. But this is I guess it's a meta tier list from someone who has barely any experience in this game? Yeah, let's go. So Infernus is going to go into my B tier, I think, again, because Infernus has pretty solid damage over time abilities, but he is also one of the most telegraphed characters in the entire game. His run, very easy to see coming and get out of dodge, and as long as you don't stand on the floor, that's not going to do damage to you. And his ultimate also has a really big wind-up, and you have to be close to Infernus for it to stun you, and if you can just get away from him using a movement ability or just superior movement skills with, you know, dodge rolls and stuff like that, then it's not going to stun you. And then he's really mostly dependent on his burn damage from his gun in order to kill you, and while he certainly can be okay, I just don't really feel like I can put him any higher than B. Ivy is a pretty dang good character overall. She's another supportive type of character, kind of similar to Dynamo, but she also has some really powerful offensive skills as well. Ivy's gun is an absolute menace. I have had people mow me down with that super quickly. She is definitely capable of getting kills if she wants, but she also buffs up her teammates, and she has a pretty powerful stun ability that makes her immortal and then stuns anyone who's close to her when it ends, and that can definitely be used to shut down a lot of ultimates or other things, and be used to dodge ultimates as well, so that is pretty good, just sort of multi-tool utility aspect that she has there. And of course, her ultimate allows her to fly herself and potentially another ally around the map. She can use it to get out of danger, she can use it to go in, she can synergize it with stuff like Seven's ult, which I've seen, and yeah, that's pretty cool too. She's got a lot of utility, she's a pretty good character, and I think she's a fine choice for A. Kelvin kind of disappoints me because he looks pretty similar to me, right? I mean, we're gingers, we got the beard, and we both love the cold. I main Evian Paladins, so I felt like the Frost Ginger character would be my favorite in this game, but no, actually, I don't really find Kelvin to be that strong most of the time when I see him, whether I'm playing him or whether I'm playing against him or he's on my team. His kit is kind of weird because he doesn't really do that much damage. He is focused a lot more on utility, but unlike Ivy and Dynamo, I just don't really feel like his utility is nearly as good. He has his grenades, which he can use to deal damage to the enemies, or he can use them to heal himself and his allies, and I guess that's pretty okay. He's got the ice path, which is interesting, although sometimes I feel like he moves way too slowly while using it. And his dome can force people to take 1v1s with him. It can really just siphon off and sector off a team fight, and it can be used to certainly secure some kills, especially if his team plays around it, but it can also just be used to stall out the fight and trap Kelvin, and it can also even mess up Kelvin's teammates, because you can't shoot through the dome, you can't move through the dome, you're trapped inside or outside of the dome, and sometimes that's really just not what you need. I feel like it's really easy to do bad on Kelvin, and so I'm just going to put him in subpar. Maybe there's something that I'm missing with this character that makes him a lot stronger at higher tiers, or at higher ranks, excuse me, but I'm just not seeing it from my gameplay experience, so Kelvin's going to be our first C-tier pick. Lady Geist, my gosh, I feel like she's the character I see the least in this game. I feel like nobody plays this character, and honestly, that's probably for a good reason. She's got an interesting kit where, like, she does do some pretty decent damage, but she also is just, I don't know, I feel like there's something off about the character, and she's just not really capable of as much as other characters in this game. Her ultimate as well is kind of interesting, because she can swap health pools with another enemy, and basically, if she gets low and the other enemy is full HP, then she can swap and she can heal herself and then make them take a bunch of damage, but if the health bars aren't quite the same, you know, if the enemy is already low and she's full health, and the ultimate kind of just doesn't really do anything, and so, I don't know, she's a weird character. I don't see a lot of her. I'm just going to put her in C and move on. Lash! Oh my gosh, this character is fun. He is a fun guy. He's got a big personality. He's kind of an asshole, and that's not pejorative. That's literally how Valve describes him in his lore description. And he's pretty darn strong. He has a lot of mobility, which is good for survivability, for chasing down targets, and his mobility ties into his damage, because the higher he goes into the sky and then slams down with his ground strike, the more damage he deals, allowing him to really burst down enemies, and he's got good sustain from his restorative whip. So already that's pretty good, but the reason why I'm putting him in S tier and not A tier is because of his ultimate. His ultimate is so strong when used properly. He can basically vault up into the sky and then target a whole bunch of enemies, draw them all towards him, stunning them, and then slam them into the ground basically wherever he's looking. And this ability can be used with so many different things. It can be used to pick up some enemies and throw them into your team, making them out of position, stunning them, and allowing Lash's teammates to finish them. You can use it to throw them into a walker, making them take big damage from the walker and possibly get stunned again by the walker, so just stun locking them indefinitely. Or you can use it to throw them towards another ultimate on your team. I got comboed the other day by a Lash player who ulted me and my team into a Dynamo ult. Needless to say, we got wiped. That was utterly ridiculous. So the combo potential with Lash's ultimate is through the roof. It's a really powerful ultimate, and that's why I'm putting him in S tier. McGinnis is quite the interesting character. She brings a lot of heavy damage to the table, but she also has some of the worst mobility in the entire game. She is really good at busting down objectives and controlling zones, because she's got her turrets that deal additional spirit damage, she's got a really powerful gun, and of course she's got the wall, which can be used to stun enemies out of certain abilities, and she can also use it to trap them, cordon them off, block entire attacks. She's got a lot of utility, but the trade-off is she's very easy to dive, in the sense that, you know, if you chase her, eventually she's going to run out of stamina before you, because she's got less stamina than the average character, and she doesn't have a movement ability as well, so that is kind of the one trade-off. She's a very powerful character, she's got a lot going for her, but that limiting factor of having basically no mobility prevents me from putting her into S, so I think I'm going to put her in A as a pretty solid choice. Mirage is a goofy character that I've never quite liked, because his kit is kind of strange. He has pretty solid damage output, I suppose, because when he shoots enemies, he passively builds up marks on them, and then he can detonate that mark to deal a big burst of spirit damage, and that can certainly be very powerful. However, the rest of his kit is kind of weird. He has this tornado, which is certainly a good tool for lifting enemies up and basically stopping their momentum and making them vulnerable to Mirage's attacks, but it is very short-ranged, so it's not something that is super difficult to dodge, especially if you see the Mirage walking towards you, coming at you. You can predict that he's going to try and tornado you, and then you can just roll away from it. And his ultimate is just kind of weird. It basically lets him teleport to anyone who's visible on the minimap, so any of his teammates or possibly some of the enemies. And this can be used to gank certain lanes, but it can also just as easily get Mirage killed if he happens to teleport in at a bad time. And also this ultimate isn't really conventional in the sense that you don't use Mirage's ult to just deal a bunch of damage and get a kill, or lock people down and secure them for a kill, or something like that. It's not flashy, it's not super powerful, game-changing in the same way as something like Lash or Dynamo or Bebop's ultimates. And so, again, this might be a character that maybe I'm underrating, and he's certainly not bad, so I'm just going to put him in B tier. You let me know what you think about him in the comments section. Mo and Krill, on the other hand, is a very strong character. Mo and Krill has one of the best ults in the game, in my opinion, because similar to Dynamo's, it locks down an enemy for a very long time. Mo and Krill basically latches onto someone, stuns them for multiple seconds, allowing his team to finish them off. And unlike Dynamo's, it's only a single target ultimate, but it has a much lower cooldown than Dynamo's ultimate. So he's able to do it more consistently. If there's one player in particular that's being really annoying and really powerful, you can consistently Mo and Krill ult them and have your team focus them and finish them. So it's a very powerful ultimate in that regard. He's also pretty tanky. He's got a healing option. He gets more health for every single kill that he gets during his ultimate. And yeah, he generally is capable of doing a lot of damage as well. Now, the character is also kind of interesting in the sense that whenever I see Mo and Krill, he's usually among the top souls in the lobby. I'm not entirely sure why that is, because there's nothing inherently in his kit that would like make him really good at farming souls from what I can tell, but that's just another aside I thought I'd mention, is that yeah, I usually see him performing pretty well in that regard. So, and hey, more souls equals more powerful, which means Mo and Krill gets even stronger. So yeah, Mo and Krill, generally pretty good character. Paradox is quite the interesting character. She is the Time Lord of this game, and she has pretty powerful abilities. Her first ability is a grenade. It's pretty good at clearing camps and minions and stuff, and generally just supportive damage. But where things really get interesting is when you take a look at her other abilities. She has a wall that can block pretty much most projectiles in the game. It doesn't block certain things like Bebop's laser, but it will block most other things, and that is already pretty powerful for her to have. And unlike Kelvin's ult, it doesn't stop her own team from shooting in the process. And she can also make the enemies take a bunch of damage and get slowed if they walk through the wall, which can be a good tool to help stop Paradox from being chased and come back from a fight. And she can also do a metric crap ton of damage with her kinetic carbine, which charges up a really powerful shot that blasts the enemies for huge damage and also slows them down temporarily, making them easier to hit for her other teammates. So that is a really powerful ability as well. And finally, she can use her ultimate to reposition the enemy. Now, this is a trickier ultimate to use than something like Lash's ultimate or Bebop's hook, because it can end up putting Paradox out of position herself. She needs to use it smartly, but she can use it to potentially lock down an enemy, put them really horribly out of position, and get them killed for her team. And it has a very low cooldown as well. And one other thing she can do with it is she can charge up the carbine, put the wall down, ult somebody through the wall to make them take a pretty big burst of damage, then hit them with a kinetic carbine while they're trapped in her backline. She can basically just combo them to death. So there is a lot of playmaking potential for Paradox. I do see her tend to do quite well when I play her. She's surprisingly effective, and so I'm going to put her into the A tier. Pocket is a pretty nifty character. They're enshrouded in mystery and intrigue, and they've got a pretty mobile kit that has both mobility and survivability and quite impactful damage too. The first ability does a big amount of damage if you can consistently hit those shots, and also you can of course do the cloak and suitcase combo where you send the cloak out, and then you go into the suitcase, and then you teleport to the cloak to basically deal a massive amount of damage to an enemy who happens to be standing next to it. So that's pretty cool too. And you can also use, of course, the cloak and the suitcase to get in, use his ultimate, which is a pretty massive, long-lasting DOT, and then get out. So he can really be a pest that's capable of getting a lot of kills if you're good at him. He does require some finesse. He is a pretty skillful character, and I'm not the best at getting value out of him, but I have seen Pocket players absolutely destroy lobbies before. So I'm going to put Pocket into the A tier. 7 is a pretty chill guy. For being being pretty much the main villain of Deadlock, or at least one of the main villains of Deadlock. He's got a very simple, very fun kit. You have big AoE damage that's really good for farming souls and farming camps, which means that he can build up a lot more power a lot more quickly than other characters if he's doing a really good job at farming. And he also has some pretty good abilities. He's got a very consistent, powerful stun that can lock down enemies. It actually gives his team enough time to react to the stun, because you put the stun on somebody, it has this big orange circle that lets you know, hey, this person's about to be stunned, which means your team can look at them and be like, oh, okay, they're about to be stunned. Pew, 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 shoot them. Which, that's nice, you know? It's very telegraphed, but I think that telegraphing actually ends up helping Seven more than it hurts. And he's also generally just capable of doing big damage with his right-click ability as well, which augments his gun to do even more damage. And his ultimate is kind of an interesting one, because it absolutely hard farms noobs who don't know how to get away from it, but if you are better at the game, Seven's ultimate does become a lot harder to use. However, it can still get value because it has such a gigantic range that it works really well as a zoning tool. You can easily scare enemies off, force them to scatter, or force them to try and look at you and stop you from ulting, which allows your teammates to have an opportunity to strike. And I think that zoning potential is definitely valuable, even if Seven's ultimate arguably does fall off a lot harder the higher rank you go. Next up, we have Shiv, and Shiv is a very annoying character to fight because he just will not go down. Shiv has a passive ability that defers damage to be taken later over time, rather than all taken up front as a big burst, which allows him to have more opportunities to heal himself and survive a fight. And it also gives him, in a sense, some kind of damage reduction when he's actually in the fight, allowing him to really pressure the enemies harder and then still survive at the end of the day for it. So that is pretty powerful, and it also scales pretty well with the fact that he has really good damage over time from his daggers that are very consistent, they have a lot of uptime, and they do a pretty solid amount of damage. And his ultimate also is one of the only executes in the game. If the enemies are at a certain health threshold, Shiv can lunge towards them and instantly kill them, and if his ultimate is perfectly maxed out, then he will also instantly reset the cooldown of his ultimate, allowing him to potentially chain it, and basically just boom, 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 execute multiple people throughout a team fight, which is a pretty powerful ability to have. So he's super tanky, does a lot of damage, has a pretty good ultimate. I think that's S tier material, no doubt. Like Calico, Sinclair is another character that I just don't really jive with. I don't really understand him, but that doesn't mean he's not strong. Sinclair is able to do some pretty nifty things. He's able to do a lot of damage. He's able to basically neutralize enemies by turning them into a rabbit temporarily, which takes a lot more damage and isn't able to use most abilities, so that's really powerful, and it's not even his ultimate. And he also is able to teleport around. He can basically leave a lure somewhere safe, and then he can dive in super far, get a kill, or put some pressure on the enemies, and then teleport back out. And he can do a number of other different things with his lure as well. So, generally, pretty strong already, but then you take a look at his ultimate, and the ultimate is quite powerful, because it allows him to basically steal an ultimate from anybody else in the lobby, so he can basically duplicate somebody. Let's say you've got a Dynamo on the enemy team. Well, Sinclair can look at Dynamo, take his ultimate, and then use Dynamo's own ultimate against him. That's pretty crazy. Or you can do the same thing with Lash or Bebop or any of the other really powerful ultimates in the game. So Sinclair has a lot of potential to be great, and that's why I'm going to put him up into S tier. As much as I hate snipers, I gotta say Vindicta is pretty darn strong, and honestly, pretty fun as far as the sniper character is concerned. So she is able to do a lot of damage just passively with her gun, and also her crow, which does a pretty nice amount of spirit damage to the enemies, but where she really gets strong is with her stake, which ties enemies down to a particular region for a couple of seconds, and that is really, really good for helping her team lock down kills, really powerful form of crowd control. And her ultimate is also capable of dealing a bunch of extra damage to enemies that are below 50% health, meaning that, kind of like Shiv, she has another way to somewhat execute the enemies. And when you max this ultimate out, it also gives her a bunch of additional souls per teammate that she executes with the sniper rifle. So you can see how she can very quickly build up a lot of power as the match goes on, but it is kind of a risky thing, because if you're not getting kills, then you're not going to get nearly as much value out of Vindicta, and if you're not able to get kills consistently, then arguably she is a lot worse than some of the characters in S, which is why I'm going to put her in A. She has a lot of potential to be strong, but I just don't really feel comfortable with putting her in the S tier. Viscous is my boy! I love Viscous. He's my favorite character in this entire game, and he's who I've spent the most time playing. And I'm going to put him as a solid A tier character, because Viscous is capable of a lot without necessarily being overwhelming. He has some of the absolute best mobility in the entire game, if you know how to use the stamina system well with his goo punches. So already off to a pretty good start. That mobility can be used to keep Viscous alive, or it can be used to chase down targets. And the Puddle Punch can also be used to displace enemies, combo them with big damage. It's just a really useful tool. On top of that, he has the Cube, which can make himself or a teammate immortal and heal them back up for several seconds at the cost of them not really being able to move or use other abilities. And this is really good for blocking very powerful enemy effects, whether it's a big damage over time effect, a stun, a bomb, an ultimate, whatever. Viscous can protect his team or himself. Shoot, you can even cube someone that Mo and Krill is ulting, and you can save them from almost certain death. It's a really good ability. And his Goo Ball, which is his ultimate, allows him to roll around and consistently stun the enemies as long as he's able to bounce back into them. And this can be insanely powerful for getting kills and making space, because Viscous is really tanky as well. But the enemies do have a lot of counterplay options, so the better the enemies are, the better at Goo Ball you need to be. It's a very balanced ability despite how strong it truly is. And Viscous also is capable of generally just doing a lot of damage through the power of his alt fire, his regular gun, and also his first ability, the Goo Splatter, doing really big amounts of damage. So Viscous is overall a very solid character. Vyper is quite a powerful character when it comes to Vyper's damage output. She has a really powerful gun because it has a fast fire rate, it does big amounts of damage, and even though it has a relatively low clip size, she can make use of the fact that she has this passive, which makes her slides travel farther, last longer, and generally just better, and then use the infinite ammo while you get while sliding to just unleash lead, hot steaming lead, into the enemy's faces. It is quite a powerful thing if you're good at it, and she also does a lot of spirit damage too with her Venom, which basically deals more damage to the enemies the lower HP they are. So you charge them down with a slide, unleashing bullets into their face, you put that Venom on them, get them low with the gun, and then the Venom finishes them off. And also the Bola is a pretty powerful ability because it slows down the enemies, making them very easy to kill, or it petrifies them, locking them down, making them unable to participate in the team fight for the next few seconds, which is also pretty good as well. So yeah, Vyper, very excellent choice for a damage hero. Warden is a raid boss. He's so freaking good. This guy can actually take on the enemy team by himself if he wants to, if he's given the opportunity. This guy has such powerful abilities. He has the ability to lock an enemy down by slowing them down with his alchemical flask and then using the sort of root ability. I forget what the name is, but the one that traps them in place if they don't get out of the certain zone in time. And he can also combo that with other slowing abilities like slowing bullets or a slowing hex in order to basically guarantee this root. And then when they're rooted, it's so easy to kill them. And that's not even mentioning the fact that his ultimate basically turns him into a god, where he gets incredible amounts of leech, incredible amounts of damage reduction, and is able to just run people down doing crazy amounts of damage to them. Every time I see Warden, most of the time, he's absolutely freaking godlike. And the few times I've played him, I have absolutely steamrolled lobbies. He is just utterly busted. So Warden is one of the easiest S tier picks on this entire list. Next we have Wraith, who, like Vyper, is a very gun-oriented character. She is able to do loads and loads of damage by just pumping hot lead into the enemy's faces. And she also has pretty good mobility with her teleport that allows her to get out of dodge or chase an enemy very effectively. And her ultimate is really good because it locks enemies down and then silences them for multiple seconds, making them really easy to kill if they are super dependent on their abilities to survive. So she has a lot of great things going for her. I don't really feel like she's S tier material because I feel like I have seen enough Wraiths struggle to not really be considered an overpowered S tier character. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I should put her into S tier. I could definitely be convinced to put her into S tier, but at the very least, she's a very solid A tier character, does a lot of damage, pretty powerful overall, and pretty easy too. And finally, we have Yamato, and I'm going to put her in A as well. She was S tier for a time because her gun build was absolutely broken. The amount of damage she could deal with that was disgusting. However, I know they have nerfed it, so I don't really think that she should go into S tier anymore. She does have really powerful abilities. She's capable of doing a ton of damage, and she has pretty decent survivability as well, and pretty good ability to chase down targets with her grappling ability. So she's a very strong character, but I think after the nerfs, A tier is probably the place for her rather than S tier. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my 100 hours Deadlock tier list. It's, probably not the greatest, but, hey, that's where the, super high rank players can come into the comment section down below and help me make my tier list better, because I am absolutely open to learning. I absolutely love Deadlock. I'm having a blast playing it, and, yeah, you'll notice that, at least in my opinion, the game is really balanced. Like, most characters are really freaking strong. The majority of the roster is A tier or higher, and even the characters in B tier are pretty good when given the opportunity. The only characters that I don't usually see perform that well are in C tier, and even then, I mean, I'm sure with the right player and with enough skill, you will be able to make these characters pop off as well. That's one thing I really like about Deadlock, is basically everyone can be super duper strong if you play them well. But let me know what you think about it in the comment section down below. Make sure to drop a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new around here and you want to see more Deadlock content, and I will see you guys next time. Peace out.